Of all the books that have ever laid claim to the title of the Great American Novel, one tome towers above the rest. Herman Melville's 1851 whaling epic Moby Dick is perhaps the essential treatise on the story of America. Melville was America's own Shakespeare or Dostoevsky, a prophet who exposes their native country's pride, violence, and immorality. You probably already know the story, even if you've never cracked its pages. A doomed whaling ship, piloted by the mad Captain Ahab, pursues a bloody quest for revenge against the eponymous White Whale. Moby Dick bit off Ahab's leg, maiming him and instilling in him a burning thirst for vengeance. In pursuit of this revenge, Ahab sacrifices his crew, his ship, and finally his own life. None survive the cursed journey. But saying that Moby Dick is a book about how revenge is bad would be like saying Dr. Strangelove is a movie about how nuclear weapons are bad. Sure, it's technically a true statement, but it also totally misses the bigger picture and the themes these works are expressing.
Mr. President, we must not allow a mine shaft gap!
Sir, I have a plan. Monsieur!
Because Moby Dick is more than just a novel. It is the ultimate cipher and skeleton key to understanding the history of the United States and the past 3 centuries of Western industrial capitalist society. Consider the subject matter: whaling. When Moby Dick was published, the most widely used hydrocarbon in the world wasn't gasoline. It was whale oil. All around the world, whales were hunted and killed for their blubber, their meat, their bones, and their skins. But most of all, for their oil. Just as coal and crude oil were the fuels that powered the industrial expansion of the 20th century, whale oil was the fuel that powered the 1700s and 1800s. In Moby Dick, America is brought to life in the form of Ahab's ship, the Pequod, so named for the Pequot tribe of indigenous Americans. This tribe was slaughtered by Puritan settlers in the early 1600s, giving rise to what is now the state of Connecticut. In the novel, the 30-man crew of the Pequod are a jumble of races, ethnicities, religions, and political beliefs. That number 30 is especially significant. There were only 30 United States when Moby Dick was published, and slavery was still legal in 15 of them. Despite frequent clashes around identity and social status, this multicultural and diverse crew somehow manages to coexist and function. But like America itself, the dark side is never far removed. In hunting Moby Dick, Ahab consecrates a black mass, spurring his crew into an unholy frenzy against the spirit of nature itself.
Now, drink ye, mates. Drink ye, harpooneers, ye that stand the bow of the whaleboat. Drink and swear. Death to Moby Dick! Death to Moby Dick! Drink and swear! May God hunt us all if we do not hunt Moby Dick to his death!
Like their captain, every member of the Pequod becomes infected and disfigured by this lust for revenge. Those who could object, or who might have the power to stop this madness, say nothing and are silent. Everyone dies, and Moby Dick sinks the Pequod beneath the waves. And in the closing words of the book, the great shroud of the sea rolled on as it rolled 5,000 years ago. Moby Dick is considered a masterpiece today, but it took a few decades for the world to come around. Initial reviews of the novel were very mixed, and Melville was frequently criticized for his meandering and heavy-handed prose. Only about 3,000 copies were sold while Melville was still alive. The first print run of Moby Dick was also incomplete and did not contain the epilogue chapter, revealing that the narrator Ishmael had survived the sinking of the Pequod. The British publisher also censored certain passages of the book, which forced Melville to make some last-minute rewrites to get it printed. Moby Dick stands as a testament to how the true meaning of the greatest works of fiction are not found in a rote recitation of their stories. Their power lies beyond words, expressing something universal that is deeply felt by all human beings. True art transforms us, giving voice to the meaning behind the words. This is a story about America, about war and bloody violence. This is a story about how the forces we seek to conquer and control are the very things that will be our undoing. And most of all, this is a story about how a misunderstood gaming masterpiece ended up being even more prescient and powerful than we could have ever realized. At the time this video is being published, it's been nearly 5 years since the release of Metal Gear Solid V. This game was the subject of the very first analysis video I ever did on this channel. And hell, the Metal Gear series is the main reason I started to care about game analysis in the first place. 5 years later, MGSV still holds up better than any other game in the series, 3 included. From a purely mechanical gameplay perspective, this is indeed the ultimate Metal Gear. A stealth action sandbox with near-limitless modularity and replayability that's every bit as compelling now as it was when it was first released in 2015. There's also an incredible confidence and deftness to the game's storytelling.
That woman!
I know. She knows our location. Either way, one of these days we're gonna have to kill her. But now is not the time. When the time comes, I'll pull the trigger.
The mandatory codec calls interrupting the action are almost entirely gone, with these conversations relegated to optional cassette tapes that can be listened to at any time. And while the cutscenes make up less of the overall playtime than the previous games in the series, the cinematic sequences of MGSV benefit enormously from this quality over quantity approach. These cutscenes are masterful with their use of cinematic language, with a visual flair that almost no other game before or since can touch.
Now go! Let the legend come back to life.
But when it comes to the discourse around this game,
Such a lust for revenge?
What the hell happened to Metal Gear Solid 5?
Fuck that. Fuck that. Fuck Konami. Fuck
Konami.
the discovery that Episode 51 was cut from the game, and director Hideo Kojima's subsequent ouster from Konami after the game's release, gave rise to a narrative. That money-minded Konami had done our beloved Kojinius dirty, forcing him to compromise his vision and abridge or remove huge chunks of MGSV, leaving a woefully incomplete final product. And this truth became an unshakable meme.
Wipe this meme from the face of the earth.
This meme that MGSV is unfinished was very lucrative for some of the people who created it. But it was also insincere and hugely insulting to the game's entire creative team. Series director Hideo Kojima has said in multiple interviews since leaving Konami's legal grasp that MGSV is a complete and finished product, and that he is satisfied with the game he released, story included. But this whole episode raised some very interesting questions about the idea of artistic integrity, the death of the author, and what it means to call a piece of art incomplete. Because by the same standard that was used to tar and feather MGSV, the revered masterpiece Metal Gear Solid 2 is also shamefully incomplete and a permanent blot on the records of everyone involved. Multiple bosses and levels couldn't be finished in time and were scrapped from the game. The sniper boss, Old Boy, was booted to MGS3, where he became the End. The Dead Cell spiritualist Chinaman, yikes, was cut from the game and folded into Vamp. The whole second half of the game, Shell 2, was abridged and cut short. And perhaps most significantly, entire sections of the ending sequence of Metal Gear Solid 2, like scenes showing the Statue of Liberty being destroyed and Manhattan's Battery Park being crushed underneath Arsenal gear, were censored for political considerations, since the game came out mere weeks after the events of September 11, 2001.
At long last, it seems that she will go through the immigration process. Will Lady Liberty finally get her green card?
MGS2 is also absolutely incomplete when measured by the metric of what fans expected versus what they got. For years and years, the game was absolutely torn to shreds for its bait-and-switch protagonist swap. From the gruff, stoic, and hypermasculine Solid Snake, to the fey, whiny, and effeminate Raiden. For a long time, fans hated MGS2 for making us play as an inferior shadow of the beloved main character. It took nearly a decade of deep analysis and reflection for the game to be rightly recognized as an incredibly prescient piece of speculative fiction, which predicted so much of the internet-mediated dystopia we're currently living in.
But in the current digitized world, trivial information is accumulating every second, preserved in all its triteness, never fading, always accessible.
Rumors about petty issues, misinterpretations, slander.
All this junk data, preserved in an unfiltered state, growing at an alarming rate.
It will only slow down social progress, reduce the rate of evolution.
Right. You seem to think that our plan is one of censorship.
Are you telling me it's not?
You're being silly. What we propose to do is not to control content, but to create context.
Create context?
And with MGSV, it's happening all over again.
It is happening again.
I started this video by talking about Moby Dick not just because of the obvious thematic parallels. After all, the game was only too happy to invite these comparisons. From the initial E3 hype campaign, courtesy of Joachim Mogren of Moby Dick Studios, through to the numerous in-game callouts.
Ahab, do you read me? This is Pequod.
It's a whaling ship.
This is Pequod. Arriving shortly at LZ.
Okay, have time to go.
This is Queequeg on station to provide cover.
You can call me Ishmael.
This is Pequod. Have arrived at LZ. Will stand by.
The similarities between MGSV and Moby Dick go so much deeper than surface-level invocation. Each is the work of a creator who thinks relentlessly about the way the world functions, and the hidden forces that shape our reality. And each story reflects its historical moment in its own way. MGSV holds a black mirror up to our own reality, as the series has done in every previous installment. But even more critically, MGSV is a dark inversion of the story and themes of the most controversial game in the series.
V has come too.
MGSV is loaded with imagery and dialogue centered around duality and reflections. In other words, mirrors. This duality is even baked into the structure of the game itself, with the split between the opening prologue chapter of Ground Zeroes, followed by the game proper in The Phantom Pain. The tale begins with the legendary super soldier Big Boss, aka Naked Snake, conducting a solo infiltration of the US-run Guantanamo prison encampment in Cuba. Betrayed by his country and disaffected by how soldiers are abused and discarded by those they serve, Snake founded the private military force Militaires Sans Frontières, an army for hire to anyone who can afford them. Upon completing his mission in Guantanamo and rescuing his comrades, the truth is revealed. It was all a ruse, designed to lure Big Boss away from MSF's mother base so the Illuminati deep state,
The Lale-Lule-Lo.
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 Damn the Patriots!
I ain't no Lale-Lule.
could wipe them out entirely. The aftermath of the attack on Mother Base leaves Snake in a coma for 9 years, severing his left arm and embedding his body with 108 pieces of shrapnel.
Upon examination, we discovered 108 foreign bodies embedded within you.
Including a gigantic horn-like shard protruding from his forehead. Let's do a quick numerology interlude because that number, 108, is especially significant. Many denominations of Hinduism, Buddhism, Zen, and Jainism speak of the 108 impurities and imperfections that all humans must struggle through in order to reach enlightenment.
Mental and physical impairment are unavoidable.
After shaking off his 9-year coma and awakening in the year 1984, Naked Snake embraces his inner demon.
Rubbing our noses in bloody battlefield dirt. All for revenge. The world calls for wet work, and we answer. No greater good. No just cause.
Cause?
Cypher sent us to hell. But we're going even deeper.
MSF is reborn as Diamond Dogs, and the boss himself as Venom Snake. He then embarks on a quest for revenge that will see him carve a path across Soviet-occupied Afghanistan and the Civil War-racked border region between the Central African nations of Angola and Zaire. Across the story of both Ground Zeroes and The Phantom Pain, the player encounters a steady procession of mirror imagery, both big and small, obvious and not. Ground Zeroes begins with us seeing the game's antagonist reflected in a soldier's helmet, and then again in a Jeep's side window. The Phantom Pain opens with a slow camera pan and zoom towards a mirror, as the on-screen text welcomes you to just another day in a war without end. Very often, imagery is first revealed to the player not by showing the thing directly, but by showing its reflection. The cutscene cinematography frequently positions characters as opposites of each other, whether to indicate a clash of values, a meeting of rivals, or a struggle between the angels and demons whispering over your shoulder. The game puts mirrored digits in front of your eyes every single time you begin a mission. The game also stresses this theme of duality in its spoken dialogue, whether it's relayed through the cinematics or the cassettes. Characters will frequently say a word or phrase, and then quickly follow it up with contrasting language.
A group above nations, even the US. And I was the parasite below, feeding off Zero's power. Just as you live because of me, he lives because of you.
Look up, please. I know it's difficult, but please look down.
Well, the good news is, you're in the land of the living. Bad news, the world wants you dead. On your feet, soldier. The whole place is coming down. Need a little pick-me-up?
This war is peace. Cypher sent us to hell.
Heaven's not my kind of place anyway.
I chose the language of gratitude instead, and go back to silence. I am quiet. I am the absence of words.
These constant invocations of duality have a subtle, suggestive, almost hypnotic quality to them. The player is being subconsciously primed for what's to come, even if you're not aware of it in your rational brain. You may have one notion of reality, or one sense of your own identity. But then something different, something strange, is reflected back at you by the Black Mirror. So which version of events can you trust? What's real? And what's an illusion? The game's narrative is further fractured, not just by the form, but also the format. Not only is MGSV divided between Ground Zeroes and the Phantom Pain, but the Phantom Pain itself is divided between its halves of Chapter 1, Revenge, and Chapter 2, Race. In retrospect, it's clear that Konami mandated that Ground Zeroes be released as a standalone game in order to recoup some of the sky-high development costs for this project. And I think this is the primary reason why players and critics alike seem to have mostly not noticed how MGSV's story and themes mirror those of Metal Gear Solid 2. This is a ruse we've seen before. Metal Gear Solid 2's divide between the Tanker, Snake, and Plant Raiden chapters served the same purpose as MGSV's split between Ground Zeroes and the Phantom Pain. You begin the game with an intro chapter that is pure stealth action pornography, starring the glorious, badass, self-insert wish-fulfillment protagonist in full regalia. And as you lay down the thunder on hapless guard after hapless guard, you think to yourself, I am so awesome. But this inciting incident then takes a dark turn, transitioning the story into a much broader and stranger tale. Throughout the rest of the game, the events of the intro are constantly remixed and recontextualized, and given new weight and import. And as the climax strikes, the entire story is revealed to be unreliable narration from an unreliable narrator. The player's identity is stripped away until they can no longer trust the reality unfolding in front of them. And as you stumble away from the battlefield, confused and unsure of anything, including your own identity, you think to yourself, who am I? Who you really are is indeed the central theme of MGSV. What kind of person is your big boss? Is he a kind and philanthropic soul who loves his comrades, never takes a life if he can help it, and spends his spare time creating a shelter home for endangered animals? Or is he the bloody demon of legend, the nuclear-armed monster who murders friend and foe alike without a moment's hesitation? Thanks to the sandbox open-world format and its tremendous emphasis on player freedom, that question is entirely up to you.
Go!
But no matter what kind of big boss you think you are, your freedom turns out to be a meaningless illusion. In its pre-release trailers, the game was hyped to us as the tale that would close the 28-year loop of the Metal Gear saga. We would finally learn how men become demons, and how the beloved warrior poet of MGS3 and Peace Walker became the nightmare that haunts every hero and villain in the series. And for the first half of MGSV, the Revenge chapter, it really seems like that's where the story is headed. After being betrayed and left for dead, the player will rise from the ashes like the Phoenix and single-handedly rebuild the legend of Big Boss. The first half of the Phantom Pain sees the player recruit and train a new private army, construct a new mother base, be joined by one badass ally after another, and develop equipment and weapons worthy of the greatest super spy the 80s has ever seen. Uncover a globe-trotting conspiracy about parasites that infect human vocal cords, get a ton of weapons and gadgets along the way, and enjoy some cool body horror and weird science story beats that help keep things interesting. It's exactly the over-the-top and maximalist approach to storytelling that we love Kojima and the Metal Gear series for, just in a different container, a different format. The narrative culminates with a solo infiltration of the enemy's secret fortress, which sees you disabling their nuclear-equipped superweapon and claiming it as your own. In that glorious moment, Metal Gear Sahelanthropus towers over Mother Base as the ultimate trophy for a conquering warrior of the nuclear age. Had the game ended right here, with the triumphant climax of missions 30 and 31, there's no doubt that Metal Gear Solid V would have been far less controversial.
We hold our rifles in missing hands. We stand tall on missing legs. We stride forward on the bones of our fallen. Then, and only then, are we alive. This pain is ours, and no one else's. The secret weapon we wield, out of sight.
This was the ending and the resolution we've been conditioned to want by decades of Hollywood blockbusters, and indeed the Metal Gear games themselves. You conquer the enemy base, beat the giant robot, maybe do a 1v1 with the big bad, and everyone rides off into the sunset while Kojima delivers one final monologue via stand-in about how we live in a society. Again, this bears repeating. Any other game would have ended things here, and we would have loved it for it. The victorious Big Boss triumphs over the New World Order, seizes the ultimate nuclear weapon, and is cursed forevermore to play the villain in the eyes of the world. But then comes the second half of MGSV. Snake must return to the battlefield once more. Soon, you'll be replaying new variants of missions you've completed before, committing yourself and your forces to an eternal proxy war without end. The crew of Mother Base is gripped with a totally baseless and evidence-free paranoia that they've been infiltrated by spies and saboteurs.
Watch the man to your left. To your right. Assume nothing. Report everything. It's the only way to protect ourselves.
One by one, all those badass allies who joined ranks with you over the course of Chapter 1 leave or are cast out of Mother Base. And just to drive the point home, they take your giant robot trophy with them. This all comes to a head with Mission 43, Shining Lights, Even in Death. This is both the black mirror that closes the loop of the narrative and the thematic finale of the entire game. A new vocal cord parasite outbreak has taken place, and no cure is possible. You must murder every single soldier, scientist, and patient in Mother Base's quarantine platform to prevent the plague from spreading. You begin the game in the prologue as a hospital patient, escaping from enemy soldiers as they mow down the facility's patients and staff. Shining Lights ends the game with an attack on a medical ward, where you're forced to execute your own soldiers. A darkened version of the very same atrocities you witnessed in the game's beginning. You start the game by putting on a new face. And in Shining Lights, you end the game by smearing the funeral ashes of your dead troops across your visage. If Chapter 1 is the player rebuilding the legend of Big Boss, then Chapter 2 forces the player to experience the breakdown and deconstruction of that legend. Until all that's left is Captain Ahab and his ship full of fanatics, pursuing mindless revenge against an enemy who might not even be real.
What if she's a spy?
What if I'm a spy? Or you?
Go on all day.
And then comes the final revelation in Mission 46, Truth. The beloved and adored series protagonist, who you thought you were playing as this entire game, gives way to someone else entirely. The player is not Big Boss. The player is you. At the end of MGSV, the main character is revealed to be a body double for Snake, forced to undergo surgery and hypnosis in order to become a literal scapegoat for the commander to whom you've dedicated your life.
Now this one, he'll take your place. From here on, he's Snake. He believes it, too.
My very own Phantom, huh?
Your skin of your teeth escape from the hospital, and indeed your very identity are a ruse, engineered by a different creeping tentacle of the same Illuminati deep state that put you in a coma in the first place. You've been fighting a phantom enemy this entire time. Your true reason for being is to draw attention away from the real Big Boss and keep the eyes of the world focused on you. The real Big Boss is off on a top-secret mission, building the glorious future he promised to his soldiers. But you're cannon fodder. This is the ultimate evil of Big Boss, his heel turn into villainy. He became a hypocrite who mouthed flowery words about freedom and independence, but in the end, he abused and betrayed his subordinates in the exact same way that he was once exploited and cast aside by the US government. And he makes everyone who follows him complicit in his deeds. Metal Gear Solid 2 told us that the hero Solid Snake was really a hollow facade, a chimeric fantasy role that anyone could inhabit with enough motivation and training, even a total loser like Raiden. Again, the Black Mirror shines back at us. MGSV tells us that anyone can be Big Boss. But this is not the same message of self-liberation espoused by the end of MGS2. This is a prophecy of damnation and the ultimate condemnation of the Hollywood power fantasy that the Metal Gear games have always aimed to subvert and deconstruct. MGS2 ended with the directive that the player should break free from the self-insert fantasy of trying to emulate a fictional action hero idol. Because this way of thinking is a prison, one that can blind you to the reality in front of you and make you that much easier to manipulate.
Anyone you know? No, never heard the name before. I'll pick my own name, and my own life. I'll find something worth passing on.
To be free, to live a truly heroic life, you must find your own meaning outside of received wisdom and official truths. But MGSV ends on a diametrically opposing note to the player. If you still want to be Snake so badly after playing all these games, then please enjoy your first-class ticket to hell, because we're all going down together. It all comes full circle with this revelation. You, the player of 2015's MGSV, are the big boss that the player of 1987's Metal Gear must kill in order to beat the game. The circle is complete, and the snake swallows its own tail. All that's left to us is an eternally recurring loop of violence and death, directed first at an external enemy, and finally, against ourselves. For quite a while, I had thought that MGSV was one long, extended parable about the post-9/11 United States and its global quest for revenge against terrorism. And yes, that's definitely one interpretation. The Metal Gear games have always been sly and sharp parables on the perils of militarism and foolish imperial power games.
4 years ago, the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. The Muslims are fighting back with Western support.
But after this most recent playthrough, I'm more convinced than ever that MGSV is really a game about Japan. The government of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is currently pursuing an objective that has long been desired by the country's more authoritarian political elements: the revocation of Article 9 of Japan's post-World War II constitution. Following Japan's defeat and post-war occupation by the US, the country wrote Article 9 into its new constitution, which outlawed war as a means of settling international disputes. But that idealism wouldn't last long. In 1949, the Chinese Communist Revolution was complete, and Chairman Mao Zedong officially declared the foundation of the People's Republic of China. Washington nervously watched as Japan was gripped by economic stagnation and hyperinflation, which led to the rapid rise of leftist and communist political factions within the country. In response to the specter of creeping communism across the Pacific, the US enacted its reverse course policy for Japan. Labor strikes were outlawed, and public unions were forbidden from most forms of collective bargaining.
Communist rioters in Tokyo turned May Day into a nightmare as fanatical speakers whipped 400,000 workers and students into hysteria with anti-American speeches.
Japan's socialist and communist political parties were criminalized and driven underground. Pro-Western and pro-business politicians, and even straight-up Yakuza, were installed in the government by the US occupiers, who would go on to form what is now the country's ruling Liberal Democratic Party. And as part of the reverse course, Article 9 was watered down and reinterpreted to allow Japan to begin maintaining domestic armed forces and a navy, the so-called JSDF, or Japanese Self-Defense Forces. All in the name of fighting communism. When Shinzo Abe assumed the prime ministership of Japan in 2012 as leader of the Liberal Democrats, he made it one of his primary goals to see Article 9 revised or repealed. By 2014, and with the full support of the Obama administration, he had succeeded in bypassing the country's parliament. Article 9 was, in effect, reinterpreted to allow Japan to go to war on behalf of its allies. Japan's government is currently gripped by a debate over full remilitarization. The verdict will supposedly be rendered before the end of 2020. Fully 2/3 of the Japanese population rejects the plan to overturn Article 9, but Abe's ruling party may nevertheless get its way. Many supporters of the Article 9 revision claim that spending big on the military will boost the stagnant Japanese economy and help the nation address its numerous social pathologies by instilling a shared sense of national pride and purpose in the citizenry. But the true aim of this push for remilitarization has always been clear from the outset. Washington and Western Europe need another spear carrier for their proxy wars. They would like nothing more than to see Japan become a mercenary military force with global reach. The entirety of MGSV is a thesis statement against militarization, and it does not mince words or try to both sides the argument. Right now, in my own country, we can see a very relevant and pertinent example of what happens when a nation enshrines war as its highest principle. It begins with hatred and violence directed against external enemies. But those chickens always come home to roost.
You're clear. All right, firing. Line here. What's the stage line out? Let me know when you have it. What shoot? Light them all up.
Light them up! Get inside! Get your health down! Let's go!
Light them up!
Go inside now! Get in the hell!
History is rife with these examples of imperial force boomeranging back home, from the Praetorian Guard of ancient Rome through to the Schutzstaffel of Nazi Germany. The violence we export abroad and our ceaseless lust for domination are intimately linked to the social collapse that we are experiencing at home. War can only beget more war, giving way to an endless spiral of violence. This isn't just some head-in-the-clouds philosophizing ripped from one of my Japanese animes. This is the world we're living in, right now, and Metal Gear predicted it all. In 2021, the New START nuclear arms control treaty will expire. For Russia and the US, there will no longer be any restrictions on nuclear weapon development or deployment, and the global disarmament movement will be, effectively, dead in the water. With START gone, the entire post-Cold War arms control regime will disappear overnight, and nothing will be there to stop every nation and private army from exploiting nuclear technology for their own ends.
I understand, but why Metal Gear? The nuclear age ended with the turn of the millennium.
Oh, you're wrong. The threat of nuclear war isn't gone. In fact, it's greater than it's ever been.
The world will need a new common tongue. A language of nukes. My Metal Gears shall be the thread by which all countries are bound together.
The scientific industrial powers that concentrated unimaginable wealth in the hands of a global elite are the same things that now doom us, whether through the threat of nuclear annihilation, runaway climate change, or plain deprivation. Like Ahab and like Snake, we have bound ourselves to a doomsday machine that will grind ceaselessly forward until we are all crushed between its gears. Cuba, Decalia, Afghanistan, Angola, Zaire. MGSV uses these resource-rich locations as its setting for a very specific purpose. Every part of this stealth action sandbox is either a hotbed of proxy warfare or a colonized territory that is deeply scarred by imperial expansionism. The Earth's natural resources, and indeed the very bodies of the people who inhabit these lands, are nothing more than pawns in a game where all that matters is optimizing profit. As you shuffled through endless screens of the game's Human Resources Simulator from Hell mode, did you even feel a twinge of guilt about how carelessly you're treating the lives of your soldiers? About how casually and thoughtlessly you make decisions by which dozens of your own troops might die in battle? Because all you can see is the bottom line, and you really need those resources to build a new platform for Mother Base anyway. You, the player, Venom Snake, are not the hero. You are not a hero. You're a sad and confused, nameless nobody, building someone else's legend and making someone else rich off your blood and sweat, whether that's Big Boss himself, the deep state Illuminati, or the larger war economy that has parasitized the world. You are fated to spend your life behind the gun until you die at the hands of the demons you helped unleash.
Cypher will rewrite the records, and I will vanish from human memory. But the thirst for revenge that I have planted will infest the system. No one can stop it now. Sahelanthropus will unleash that thirst unto the future! Major, I'm burning up!
The most devious trick of this system of control is to convince us that it's all a choice, something we want for ourselves of our own free will. But in reality, it's just another day in a war without end. When I was 14, during an all-night hangout with my high school's anime club, we tore our way through the first Metal Gear Solid. Over the course of one fateful night, that game forever changed the way I look at cinematic storytelling and gaming itself. When I was 15, mere weeks after 9/11 had turned our world upside down, I sought refuge in MGS2. I fell deep into a techno-espionage thriller that forced me to confront how my own love of escapism had blinded me to the powers that rule behind the scenes. When I was 18, deeply depressed and fearful of the future, the hope of playing MGS3 kept me alive. The story of Snake Eater reminded me that the fires of war I was seeing rise around the world were not permanent. Today's enemy could become tomorrow's friend, making our current notions of objective right and wrong seem utterly foolish. When I was 22, I was taking my first tentative steps into a bigger world, but the future had never looked more precarious and uncertain. MGS4 told me to let go of my fears, that even if I felt trapped right now, my life was not set in stone. I could find my way, as long as I kept hope alive. When I was 29, the world had nearly broken me. I was barely a year returned from my time in Russia, and it was clear that even though I was back home, I could never be repatriated. Battling my demons and my addictions while working a terrible tech job that was slowly grinding the life out of me, I was deep in a spiral of anger, regret, and self-loathing.
You too have known loss, and that loss torments you still. You hope hatred might someday replace the pain, but it never goes away. It makes a man hideous, inside and out.
And MGSV arrived right on time. After playing through the game, I spent a lot of time going full never be game over, hunting for every spare bit of symbolism I could find, playing and replaying the cinematics over and over, trying to parse the meaning of every single cassette tape. But something about the ending still didn't sit right. There was a lingering pain I could not account for, a faint sorrow over the might have beens and could have beens. You feel it too, don't you? I wanted to make them give back our past. Until finally, the experience made me pause and consider the phantom pains I was carrying around, just as I had carried the Metal Gear Saga with me my entire life. I felt so much pain and sorrow. Did I want to be haunted by loss and regret my entire life? Or was it time, finally, to move on?
It's over. Time for you to put aside the gun and live. It all began with a bunch of old fools. Now, they've all passed away. Their era of folly is over.
The world that the Black Mirror of Metal Gear presents to us, a world of super soldiers and high-stakes nuclear espionage and ruthless men engaged in grim and bloody battle. This is all an illusion.
One must die, and one must live. No victory, no defeat. The survivor will carry on the fight. It is our destiny. The one who survives will inherit the title of boss. And the one who inherits the title of boss will face an existence of endless battle.
To linger in this world of sorrow is to become consumed by it, until you are haunted and tormented by the loss, never able to reconcile your suffering. This is the phantom pain of MGSV.
Listen, don't obsess over words so much. Find the meaning behind the words, then decide. You can find your own name and your own future.
During one of the final narrative beats of MGSV, Venom is bitten by a poisonous snake and is then given an anti-venom. The cycle completes and turns once more. Venom will be neutralized, and only a phantom pain will remain. This meditation on duality is a thesis statement for the entire series.
You mustn't allow yourself to be chained to fate, to be ruled by your genes. Humans can choose the type of life they want to live. Snake, whether or not you're in the Fox-Die program isn't important. The important thing is that you choose life. And then live.
This is a thread that's been present since the very first Metal Gear Solid. In each of these games, the player is told to live on your own terms, and not on anyone else's orders. Pick up the torch so we can read our messy and sad history by its light. Learn to live by your own definitions of morality, and to see the humanity in your enemies. And to find a new lease on life, even when you think you're trapped by the system. MGSV is the final synthesis of these themes and the most timely of warnings to the player. Do not allow yourself to become Ahab. Do not chase Moby Dick. Do not become consumed by your phantoms and regrets. Do not linger in the past. This is the true essence and core of Metal Gear, and by extension all of Kojima's work. It's also the emotional through line of Death Stranding, a game that is, in so many other ways, diametrically opposite of Metal Gear in both form and content.
And if you're not scared of death, how can you value life? And life is pretty fucking fragile right now. And yeah, the old ways die hard. But that's what's gonna have to happen if we're gonna come together and build a better America. That gun won't help you here. That's her words, not mine.
It is the most vital of messages, coming from the most unlikely of places. The gap in the door that is the virtual worlds that we so adore. MGSV challenges us to find the strength to reconcile the messy, awful contradictions that are a part of being alive. Can we harmonize even the most seemingly opposite ideas and arrive at a greater, higher synthesis? Can we stand tall on missing legs? Can we turn venom into an antidote? Can a silly, sentimental, and over-the-top stealth action game directed by gaming's equivalent of Paul Verhoeven have something truly profound to say about war and the human condition? Can we turn a phantom pain into a new source of strength? And can we turn a requiem into new life?
It's not over. Not yet.
Thank you for watching. This video was the product of nearly 5 years of pondering, writing, rewriting, and multiple trips back to the drawing board. The world is in a bad place right now. You don't need me to tell you that. I hope that this kind of alternative entertainment adds some meaning and uplift to your day-to-day during these terrible times. It's been too long since my last video, I know. I was laid off from my full-time work in December, and things have only gotten more dire since then. But for the time being, I'm still alive, and I have more to say. So, there's more on the way soon. I don't have much else in the way of income right now, so if you enjoyed this video, please consider donating $1 or $2 on Patreon to help keep me going. Audience support is the lifeline keeping me afloat right now, and it'll help ensure that I can keep producing original and independent content for this channel. But if you're broke as a joke like me and can't afford to donate, that's okay too. Just sharing this video around with your friends and getting it in front of more people is hugely helpful to this channel. Algorithms and copyright claims could strike me down at any moment, so your help is more meaningful than you could know. In the meantime, I'm also streaming on Twitch every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Come hang out this Friday, August 7th, because I'll be playing my way through Metal Gear Solid 2 and talking about all things MGS. See you next time.
As long as you remember me, I will always live within you. Not a phantom limb or a phantom anything. As part of your heart. I will always be your angel of peace. So I know exactly how to finish. Say peace.